Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
All right, Matt, I appreciate you coming back.
Hey, thanks for having me again. Let's see if we go another 2.5 hours.
Yeah, man. It's pulled me off the floor if that happens. Not here under the greatest circumstances. The A's kind of took it on the chin.
They did, unfortunately. I would have liked to have seen them do better.
I love the hats.
You and I being A's fans, would have liked to have thought they would have done a little better. But they did win a series, so onwards and upwards.
They did.
They keep winning one more series every year. Then we'll get there in a couple years, right?
I posted online after the I was so depressed. I was getting slammed by people that were just let me have it. That's fine. It's part of the good-natured ribbing of sports teams. But this team has been breaking my heart in the postseason for so many years. I don't know any better.
1989 was a long time ago.
It's a long. Well, think about Pittsburgh. It's 79, right?
That's true.
So that was my comeback to one of the Pirates. One guy goes, now. You know how I feel. It's a Pirate fan. I go, no, I don't.
Not quite.
We watch winning baseball out there. I don't know what you watch.
A little different.
All right, a couple different areas I'd like to go with you on. We generally don't do politics on this show, and I love that.
Yes.
We're not going to send you down that rabbit hole. I wouldn't do that to you. But around the subject of politics, from an informational standpoint, about things that voters consider. And one of the things that we end up considering is who we're going to vote for, or what party we're going to be affiliated, or what our philosophy is economics. And it's confusing to 99% of the population. I don't need to tell you that. And that's your area of expertise. Can we, before we get into some other things, probably some more fun things, sports related, can we talk about the basic definition as it's being used in politics today for socialism versus capitalism?
Sure. So part of the problem with those words is people are just starting to use them as they want them to mean for whatever purpose they're talking about.
Okay.
So a lot of times whenever you see someone denigrating capitalism or capitalists, or this is what you get with capitalism, usually it's some inequity that they don't like, income inequity, something like that. Or they see and this would be incorrectly using it, but they would see like a business get bailed out by government, and they say, "Oh, see, this is what you get with capitalism," and that's not capitalism. And people, no one's concerned about being right anymore. People are concerned just having the loudest bullhorn, and just how loud can I bemoan something? I know I can get a lot of people on my side if I bemoan capitalism, so let's just attribute everything bad that we don't like with society or the economy or whatever to capitalism. And people on the other side are just as guilty as well, right? Any sort of program that involves the government whatsoever, right? We should have the government provide a stimulus for the coronavirus, whatever. Like some people are arguing that, that's socialism, that's socialism, that's socialism. And, it's what those words have become these days are just, if it's more government, it's socialism. If it's any outcome we don't like, it's capitalism.
Yeah, two big buckets just to toss issues into.
Right. And I mean, I don't have any examples right offhand, but I'm sure if we looked long enough, you could probably have two sides looking at the exact same issue, and one of them accusing it of being that's what you get with socialism and that's what you get with capitalism. Like two people arguing about the exact same thing from different sides, because it doesn't matter. Correct doesn't matter anymore, right? It's just how loud can I be? What buzzwords can I throw out there to try and stir up the base, and then get as many people on my side as I can politics-wise to try and do what I want to do.
Okay, so if we're going to look at the words realistically,
yes,
we are built on a capitalistic system in this country.
Generally, yes.
Generally.
Relying on markets, limited government, generally viewed as kind of protecting property rights.
Okay.
And just minimal regulation, minimal state involvement, minimal government, really. It's kind of where capitalism is. It's not that there's zero role for government, it's that there's a very minimal role for government.
So protecting property rights and necessary regulatory.
Even that might be a step too far away from kind of a pure capitalist kind of ideal.
Okay. Doesn't government just go 180 though compared to what the concept of capitalism is? Government is an expense. If you look at a ledger sheet, it's an expense, right?
Yeah, I mean, it should just be there as a support of markets, not an augmentation of markets, not a replacement of markets. It should be there to support the marketplace and nothing beyond that.
Okay. And that's obviously the crux of the problem, though, because
it's far, far beyond that. But if we think of it in kind of, what if we have this idealized version of it, that's where I would put that definition.
Okay. When someone says free markets, it's a triggering point because that's the word. Because the word free is attached to it, it gets bastardized a lot. What is actually free market? The concept of free market, what does it mean in terms of economics?
Yeah, so in my mind, it's going to be, free entry into a market, free exit from a market. We're not supporting failing industries. We're allowing people to transact as they see fit, and just kind of letting individuals handle their own, both on the supply side and the demand side, kind of handle their own affairs. And
laissez-faire concept?
Yeah, just free markets, meaning no barriers kind of put up, no artificial barriers from the state.
Have we ever had that in this country?
No.
I mean, so the experiment really has never been
right.
tried.
I mean, and so that's what a lot of people like to argue about socialism too. So they'll say, well, look at socialism, look at North Korea, look at the USSR, look at these handful of countries that have tried this, and ultimately, look at the suffering and the poverty and the starvation and all of that comes along with it. And people say, that wasn't real socialism, which by the book, okay, that's not an incorrect statement to make.
Okay.
But it certainly is as close to the experiment as possible. But then you could also make the same argument about capitalism. We've never tried pure unfettered capitalism, but nevertheless, we see these different economies, different economic models that fall on a spectrum, right? This is what I generally tell students in classes. We haven't got all the way to the end point of capitalism. We haven't got all the way to the end point of socialism, but we can kind of, if we had to, put all these different economies on a spectrum between the two, and some are going to be more towards socialism, some are going to be more towards capitalism, and there's a pretty clear pattern that emerges.
Okay, so that spectrum is there. What country wins in terms of having the most capitalism?
So there's a handful of rankings that people do that look at economic freedom rankings. So the Heritage Foundation does one. The one I like the most is going to be, it's called the Economic Freedom of the World. It's done by the Fraser Institute out of, I think they're in Vancouver, Canada. And they do rankings every year of, 1 to 160 or something like that. They don't quite have all the countries, but they've got most of them. And up near the top, usually, I don't know right offhand, but up near the top, the usual suspects. Singapore is up there, Hong Kong is up there, New Zealand is up there. Yeah. It's called freetheworld.org.com, one of those.
Those are countries I would not have come to mind.
Yeah, and they've got a very clear methodology. There's 5 different subject areas, and it's data driven, and they don't sit down in a group and say, well, looks like Singapore had a good year, let's stick them up at the top. They have, you can go dig into the methodology in the index, and it's you get this, it's on a scale of 1 to 10, so 10 the highest and 1's the lowest. And so in these particular categories, if your top marginal tax rates between this and this, you get this many points. If it's between here and here, I mean, they do it as objective as they can. It's impressive.
Yeah, New Zealand's up there.
New Zealand, yeah. I think the 3rd or 4th. My friend Bob Lawson is the one. He does this, and a guy I went to grad school, Josh Hall, does this as well.
Okay.
And so they're way, way deep in this stuff, and they're the experts on it. And so I don't want to misquote any numbers.
No, that's okay.
They'll call me and they'll say, stop saying bad things. So check out the website's what I'll say.
When you say freest capitalism, what are you referring to? Or the most freedom in capitalism?
So it's looking at economic freedom. So they've got their whole spiel. I should have read it before I came here. If not, I'm sitting here talking about it.
That's all right.
Freedom to transact, freedom to interact with other individuals, freedom to trade internationally. They've got 5 different categories, and they've got their blurb. It's written beautifully. I'm not doing it enough justice.
Well, I think that's funny though, because if you ask the average man on the street and you presented that to them, they would absolutely say, "Oh, well, we have to be the number one capitalist country in the world, or the number one. We have more freedom here than anywhere." But when you're talking specifically about freedom in capitalism,
it's just
freedom to conduct capitalism,
to transact in the marketplace.
Right. That's interesting that we're not at the top of that list.
We're in the top 10, I believe. We had dropped down a couple years back, and now I think they lag it by a couple years. So I think the most recent one should be coming out this fall. It would be probably for like the year 2018, I think.
Okay.
So they kind of takes them a year or two to get all the data. But yeah, I think last year's we were in the number 8 again. I think we're top 10. Pretty sure it was top 10 though.
But those two words, going back to when I was a child, just hearing socialism, capitalism, and like linchpin words that really got bastardized badly.
I mean, the actual economic debate that took place on this idea of capitalism versus socialism has been settled for a very long time. I mean, no one's of any academic, heft in economics is arguing for a socialist system.
Right.
But now these words have come back out, and now they're, slings and arrows of the political discourse now.
So on that spectrum, if socialism was here and capitalism was here, what lies in the middle of that?
I mean, if we're thinking that idealized capitalist version of a very, very minimal government and, government not doing very much, what we have in reality is, we have countries where there's welfare programs and there are labor regulations and there are tariffs and restrictions to international trade. There's just, I'm not saying any of those are desirable, but that's the reality of the different governments and economies that we have around the world. And that's, that's kind of where they lie in between. And, I also am clear in class. There's a lot of different dimensions to, freedom and the economy. We're really trying to just force feed this onto a single dimension here. And we acknowledge that's not that it's a useless endeavor to do that.
Okay.
But, just realize, the world's a complex place. Mm-hmm. Sticking it all in just one line we're going to miss a few things along the way.
Yeah, no question.
But still, we could still learn from it.
I think politicians in general it's part of their platform. I went before this show and I looked for the Democratic platform for the DNC's platform for 2020. I found it 92 pages later. Republican Party did not put a platform. Were you aware of that?
No,
they did not.
I really try to stay out of politics as best I can.
Well, no, I'm only looking for economic reasons. Only, I really thought I would dive into these two and have some nuggets of differentials to present here today. Just the economic part of that platform.
Sure.
And it was the Democratic platform, the economic portion was so generalized. I was expecting so much more in terms of bite there, in terms of definitive view.
If you're putting something out like that and you're specific, then that gives your opponent something to come directly back at you with. If you just speak in these broad platitudes that don't mean anything,
or you don't have anything written,
maybe not, right? Then what do they come after you with?
Yeah.
It's just I wish politics weren't like that, but I don't know what I'd want politics to be like. It's
interesting point.
I would think that if people are interested in voting and selecting who they want their leader to be, which is great, democracy is a very good thing
Go team.
For that, right? You would like to think that it would be very clear and very plain, and people could be, here's what I would plan to do, and then we could talk about that, and maybe
more
we
pragmatic too.
Disagree, but that's what I plan to do, and if enough people like me, then maybe that's what we'll do, and people will play nice. But that's those days.
Okay,
those days are in the past.
All right, well, let's turn it to the sports for a second. I get these lights to settle down. I feel like I'm going to have an epileptic fit over here. They're on battery. Go figure, right?
Maybe your lava lamps are ruined.
It could be, but the lava lamps are actually plugged into the wall. I mean, I don't know. There's better people with electricity than me. Trust me. You don't want me trying to change electrical
solid. It is a lot of lights. It's an impressive amount of lights.
Thank you. I want to talk about what the pandemic has meant for Major League Baseball and the other major sports teams in general, economically. We'll get to that. But in doing some background on your work, I mentioned off camera, I came across a presentation you did, a narrative presentation on the Olympics. And it was dated in 2014.
Okay.
And it was kind of echoing what I've always wondered is these cities across the globe, every 4 years, really 4 years in advance, I believe. That's how it's done. They award it 4 years in advance.
I think it's 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
They really jockey for position to get the Olympics, and then once they get it, they have this spectacle. There's supposed to be all this economic benefit, but the observer the stadiums go bad. They get overgrown with weeds and
Yeah.
grass and it's in blight, and it makes for interesting photography. But outside of that, how is that model serving the host cities long term? Right.
I was, like you said, we talked about this a little bit before we started here, but there's all these different areas. This is the best way I can describe it.
Okay.
So all these different areas in economics, so I teach international economics this fall, and I teach sports economics in the spring, and there's labor economics and public economics and health economics. And there's all these different areas, and there's all these kind of important questions or topics that are looked at in these areas. And one thing that I would attribute, sports economics is still a pretty young field, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And one big victory I would attribute to that field, and I don't know how much of it can be attributed directly to sports economics, but nevertheless, I think we've finally gotten to a point where it's no longer let's host the Olympics at all costs and off we go. There was a remarkable thing when I think they were awarding either the Rio Olympics or the Tokyo Olympics. This happened several years ago where let's say it was Tokyo. So we had Tokyo, and Tokyo was going against, I'd have to look, maybe it was Paris. I know they were in the running. Tokyo, Paris, and Budapest was actually the third one that was in the running there. And there was a referendum that took place in Budapest where the general public voted to remove their bid to host the Olympics, because I think people fantastically are starting to understand that these are really, really, really costly events that have very dubious economic benefits. It's at least net of costs.
Yeah, but it was so much media attention anytime the
It was
selection process goes on.
Yes, but it's amazing how even over the last couple of decades that's changed. I remember the huge party when Atlanta got awarded the Olympics.
Yes.
And I remember flying at one point to Sun Valley in Idaho and flying through Salt Lake City and seeing in the airport there all of the memorabilia for the O2. Remember they hosted the Olympics.
The winter
Olympics. So,
right.
you know, what it seems the general lay of the land now, because I get asked this occasionally, like, where do you see, you know, we seem to be past the point of let's pick a city, maybe an up-and-coming city, maybe an established city, and let's just spend $50 billion and host the Olympics. Like, that seems, hopefully, that's kind of gone by the wayside. People still seem to want Olympics, where I think we're probably going to end up is probably rotating between cities, like a handful of cities. Like maybe we rotate between like Los Angeles and London and Tokyo and Paris, I don't know, whatever. Like we rotate between like a number of cities. The infrastructure is already there. We're not going to be building new stadiums every single time. We're just going to kind of have it be, you know, people seem to want to have the Olympics. People seem to like the Olympics.
Sure.
But they don't like the public finance aspect of it, and for good reason. I mean, it's really very expensive to build these things. I mean, who needs they build a freaking velodrome for 2 days of races. Now you're stuck with a velodrome. Like nothing against velodromes, but why are we doing this?
And how they get abandoned over time.
Yeah, it was in my opinion, it was really the Athens Olympics that kind of set people down the path of maybe the internet was, social media. And so the stuff was maybe just starting to go around there. Maybe just the timing was right. But all those venues in Athens, you could just Google Athens Olympic venues, dilapidated or something. They'll pop right up.
It's amazing.
I mean, the pictures, there've been a lot of exposés on that. They're just softball fields. I mean, they're just crumbled. It's just all, and that's a country that's not exactly in not exactly like AAA rated, like finance wise.
I wouldn't think
with
so.
regards to,
how many times can they go finances.
Bankrupt? They're pressing that record there. So, yeah, obviously that was the birthplace of the modern Olympics and the ancient Olympics too, and so there was this kind of sentimentality to want to have it back there. I think they wanted to initially have it in 1996 for the 100-year anniversary. I guess they didn't get their stuff together. Maybe they were bankrupt at the time.
Okay.
So they had it in 2004. There was this big sentimentality to want to have it back in Athens, and just independent of economics and finance, I understand the sentimentality of that. That makes sense. Be kind of cool just from a straight sports perspective. But boy, it's very, very costly, and that's not a country that could absorb that.
The interesting part about it is, couldn't we have had Olympics in cities that already had these structures?
That's where I think they're going with this.
Prior built, though.
Right. Well, I mean, so they awarded, what was it, Los Angeles in is it 28 or 24 for them?
24,
But anyway,
I thought it was.
because they did them in Paris.
Right.
Anyway, it's one or the other. And a big reason was they're going to just use the
Coliseum.
I think they're using the new football stadium that just got built. But nevertheless, there's a lot of stuff that's down there.
Yeah.
Or they can kind of repurpose things, go do beach volleyball out at the beaches out there, and you can do golf. There's golf courses all over there.
Well, that happens in the States, though. But you're mentioning some of the other countries that have put outlandish amounts of infrastructure up.
That vote in Hungary, though, to withdraw their bid because the public thought it would be too expensive is a remarkable moment to me. That
pushback.
And I don't know. I would imagine there was a big public, push against, as there are all things politics, but to have a referendum and have the public say, we don't want the Olympics here because it's too costly. Usually people are generally pretty numb to the cost of things and can see the benefits of it. That's a remarkable outcome to me, to be honest with you.
What year was Calgary had the Winter Olympics? Do you remember?
88, I think.
Okay, it goes all the way back. So I was in Calgary in 2002 with my family. And I was
hopefully not in the winter.
No, it was in fall.
I gave a talk in Montreal in February once. I don't know how
so you get it.
That was cold.
But I remember being on their back porch, and they have a beautiful, beautiful home overlooking this valley and then this hillside. And geographically, I don't know where I was, but I saw this massive ski ramp at the top of this mountain in the distance. And I remember asking my great aunt, I said, is that a big resort up there? And she goes, oh, no, that's just the Olympic ski lift or ski ramp.
For the ski jump, probably.
And I go, ski jump, excuse me.
Right,
and I'm like, you see how often I watch that stuff.
Once every 4 years.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. The expensive Olympics, yes. Right. And so that was from 88, and it still was sitting there not being used.
Yeah. Have you been to the top of one of those? Because I went when I was in Salt Lake City doing something. They took us up to Park City for this, and we went and stood at the top.
Horrifying.
Who was the first person that ever did that?
I don't know.
Wow. It's
who decided.
I'm not
to
a big fan of heights anyway.
I'm not either. At all.
But it's nuts. They had some neat pictures up there to show you from the view that a camera person behind him.
Yeah.
So it's going down, and then all the spectators. It was a really neat picture to see.
It's terrifying, and I think now with the Olympics they actually put little cameras on their helmets or whatever.
Oh, I'm sure they do. And they get that camera
insane.
at the bottom too, like whizzing by before they take off.
But speaking of that, did you see the camera on the bases in Major League Baseball?
Yes. They've been doing that for a couple years though, haven't they?
I have not seen.
They only
that.
seem to do it in the playoffs.
That's weird. That was a weird angle there.
They had. Maybe it was just during the home run derby a couple years ago, but they had a camera in the ground right out front of home plate during home run derby. Maybe it was even during the All-Star game.
Wow.
Yeah. I hope Major League Baseball goes with this, and I hope they keep going. I loved it when they mic'd up Laureano during the game.
Oh, you liked it.
Great.
Okay.
It just gives you the insight of it.
McKenna, too.
Did they do him too? Yeah. Laureano dropped an F-bomb during the game, which was funny.
Which is fantastic.
It's just to be able to, maybe it's just because, I love baseball so much.
Right.
Maybe the casual observer wouldn't value it as much. I'm not a big basketball fan.
Yeah.
But even then, just to hear the conversation on the court, you never get to hear that. Or the conversation on the field.
I think football would be more fascinating.
Yeah,
There's so many people there.
Right. And my opinion is, I think, they had all these broadcasts where they're piping in crowd noise, the crowd's cheering this and that.
Yes.
Different places do it in different volumes. And it's kind of neat to see which places do it better than other. I just think it's humorous, but I think they're piping in the crowd noise so you can't hear the players because it's not the, sports and people competing, and it's not the nicest language.
No, it's not. No, it's
not for everybody.
They had, so we just watched the Astros and the A's played.
Yes.
I think they were piping in the actual crowd noise from their stadiums when they were the home team. Did you notice that? And the public address announcer was the same person.
I could believe that.
It was really interesting.
They played in, was it Dodger Stadium? Is that where the A's played? Because they had the AL teams in the NL stadiums and the NL teams in the AL stadiums because they didn't want to have the advantage.
Right. But the public address announcer when Oakland was the home team was from the Coliseum.
But probably doing it remotely because the announcers are remote. They're not at the stadium.
I know. Even the television announcers, I think.
I know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure because when the Pirates were doing their game, maybe it's changed in the postseason, but I don't think it has
changed in the postseason.
The Pirates announcers were doing it from the whatever the studio. The studio.
Strange times we're living in.
It's bizarre. We were we were trying every angle we could to try and get ourselves into one of those games, but man, they were locking it down.
Couldn't squeeze one in, huh?
Try. We worked every angle we could. We thought we might have gotten pretty close, but
did you happen to notice though, in a couple of the games I watched, even during the regular season, there were some people like walking in sections. There were people in there
near the end, like the last week or the last home series, maybe for each team. They let some of the family members come because you saw up there at the club level, they had some families. But so you had the players down there on the first level, and then that little club level they've got there, and they had families were up there, kind of one in each section. They maybe even had them in luxury boxes. I'm not sure, but they had them but they were outside, sitting, cheering them on and stuff.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the economics of baseball and football and basketball and hockey, the four majors, and we can add soccer for the rest of the world. I don't know what they're doing over there. Are they playing in empty stadiums as we are?
Yes.
Okay.
Though there was so in European soccer there is this thing called the Champions League, which is where they basically, in brief, they take the best teams from all the leagues and they play them off and they get like a champion. Yeah. And then there's also this thing called the Europa League, which is like a level below that. They take like all the best teams and they put them in the Champions League. Then they take like the next best teams and they put them in the Europa League.
Okay.
And I didn't know this
until the NIT tournament in basketball.
Yeah, kind of, right? Okay. And the benefit of the Europa, because there's really no benefit to the NIT, but kids get to play, but that's fine. Just winning it doesn't have consequences. I didn't mean that snarkily.
Yeah.
Winning it doesn't have consequences. Winning the Europa League means you get to play automatically in the Champions League the next year. So there is something to play for. And what I didn't know was to start the year, they play the Champions League winner against the Europa League winner to kind of kick off the European season.
Okay.
I didn't know that, and I thought that was pretty cool. And so I'm trying to think who won the Champions League last year. Oh, I think it was Bayern Munich played against Villarreal. I think it was a Spanish team. But anyway, they played that game, and it was in Budapest at their soccer stadium. They're the big one, and they had like, I don't know, 10,000 fans of that or something. So I think they temperature screened everybody and they kind of spaced people out. And so that was the first soccer match I'd seen with fans in a while. But no, they've pretty much been doing it fan free and then piping in the crowd noise.
Yeah.
What they did, there's all sorts of fun articles that are going around on what leagues are doing the best, just informally, right? Like what leagues are doing the best job of piping in noise and what ones are doing the worst, just like a fun 5-minute read. And I think what I read was some of those Premier League teams, the league in England, I think some of those teams took like a bunch of recordings of actual crowd and then somehow synced it with what was going on in the game. And so they've got all these natural game conditions that emerge. They hit a button and they play like a mix of what the crowd did the last time, something like that.
That's pretty cool.
It was cool, just the effort, and it sounded evidently pretty neat because sometimes some of these places like pipe in like fake fans, like computer generated, and it looks weird. I know they're trying to do something. I kind of get a kick out of it. It doesn't really bother me that much, but
I was surprised they did that at all. I really expected
Major League Baseball. Some of those stadiums did. They put in like fake fans, and it looked pretty choppy.
Oh, yeah, they did that. But when the season started, I was surprised that MLB decided to even pipe in fan noise. I was surprised at that. I thought that
they wanted to get people to not hear the players is what they wanted.
Well,
I would have loved to have heard that. Even in the middle of plays and communicating would be great.
I thought that they'd figure out the technology that we would hear the bat hit and we hear the glove, we hear the ball hitting the catcher's mitt, but nothing else. But nothing else. No voices. The rest of it would all be silent, almost like you were walking through a batting practice. Where as a fan you could hear. Right.
Wow.
Well, no. I thought there'd be announcers, but I thought we'd be watching as essentially a silent game with announcing, with like for television. And then, but you would hear like remedial things about the ball hitting the glove, the ball hitting the bat,
just like emphasizing the actual sounds.
Yeah,
of the game.
I figured they'd figure that out. But when they started pumping in noise, I think they did that more for the players' benefit than they did for television.
But the players weren't hearing the crowd noise at the games, were they? Wasn't that just over the air? Because
I thought they were hearing that.
Because I think the announcer they could hear at the games, but I thought they just piped in the crowd noise for TV. I'm not sure.
That's a good point. That's a good point because you wonder if they did pipe it in, how with the acoustics, how odd that would probably sound.
It would remind me of like Like when the Beatles played at Shea Stadium, didn't they like just have it over the PA system? Like they didn't have it wasn't loud.
Right.
It was over the PA, wasn't it? Yeah.
Right. Now the whole season was just incredible to watch.
Yes.
From a curiosity standpoint.
It was interesting. All the big stories of the week are how much viewership is down. Viewership's down like, a bunch for all these different sports, 40% for football, 40% for actually football is only down about 10%, I think, but basketball, the finals down like 40%.
Really?
Down
That
a
high?
lot. Yeah. Down a lot.
What about
And there was
baseball?
about 40. Yeah.
40%.
Yeah, and people are trying to what are some theories for this, and could just be was baseball? No, I might be getting the numbers wrong.
It's a big number.
Basketball, I know, was down 40%. That was the lead.
That's a big
But-
number.
Yeah, but it was, what could it be? Are people just, is there just too much going on right now? Are people used to just watching the finals in June, not in October? It could be a lot of things.
That could be part of it.
Right.
For basketball. Yeah. But hockey.
I mean, there's nothing that was up. I know that. I mean, it was all down.
Yeah, we talked last time. Hockey didn't bother me. It didn't.
Hockey, I've always said that when it comes to watching TV versus live experience, I think hockey's the best sport experience. Or maybe not the best sport experience. It's got the biggest gap between TV and there. When you are there, that's fun. It's enjoyable. I mean, I told you, I think last time, I'm a Sharks fan because I grew up there.
Absolutely.
I went to the finals game there, the first one they played.
Right.
And it was like, I mean, I was, in the other team's arena wearing my jersey, and it was fine. Everyone was nice to me.
Oh, yeah.
But it was
They're
just
hockey fans,
electric.
that's why.
It was just electric to be there. And I've been to a couple of Sharks playoff games, too, back in the Bay Area. And
Right.
it's just, it's a very unique thing in sports.
It doesn't translate to television, though, in terms of the same feeling of being there.
It doesn't, but I think when I'm watching playoff hockey in the past, having those fans going nuts was really a part of the experience. Because we watched it, and I think I told you last time, it just didn't feel like playoff hockey. And I like hockey, and I watched a little bit of it, but it just didn't feel I just wasn't that. I don't know. We need the fans going nuts in hockey, I think, for it to work.
I think all the four majors need him. I mean,
Yeah.
basketball. I think they got I don't know. Basketball looks odd to me with the seats vinyled over.
Yeah. Well, they did that in hockey too, didn't they? Like.
Yeah, they did.
It did look weird.
Did.
I mean, they got to do something with those empty seats. I mean, I guess that's just the decision they made.
Football looks weird when they do once in a while catch areas of the fan, but they have done interesting things with the cameras now to angles to not purposely show the first
all
row.
the empty, right?
yeah, especially like in Pittsburgh where the seats are yellow.
Yes, you can't miss those, right? Or I think they're even orange in Cleveland.
Do you think they ever thought that through? Do you think that was a decision they regret doing?
Making the seats yellow? I mean, it's such this city and its colors it makes me laugh because the A's are green, cool, and the Giants are black and gold, and like that's fine. And the New York Giants are blue, and here everyone's just that rapper had the song Black and Yellow, and it's just like the city.
Which they hated him for because he said yellow instead of gold.
Oh yes, of course. So, do they regret that? No, I think they knew full well what they were going into when they put those yellow seats in there.
Well, what was amazing to me was when the stadium opened in 2000.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Because it was that in the baseball stadium. I didn't live here at the time, but I know they were about
the
because
same.
they got rid of Three Rivers.
They were building them both the same,
right?
Roughly the same time. What was interesting to me was, and I didn't think it was a great idea. Whether or not it is, I don't know. But at the time, it didn't look like a great idea because I remember the Steelers fans getting slagged on national television because they would leave early when they were losing. Even when they're having a good season, they would leave early.
Sure.
Sort of Tommy Maddox era before Ben, of course. But Steeler fans were notoriously late getting to their seats, almost like an LA vibe.
Really?
And you had all these empty
yellow seats that are just
it was
like
and to this day, if you pay attention, even in the winter when you get a lot of black with overcoats and things,
sure.
The contrast is really punchy. And it's different. And only at the end of the game in the fourth quarter with the towels waving is it different. But during the game, and I've noticed that going to Steeler games, the Steeler fans are not always in their seats.
Yeah, I mean, even you drive through the tunnel and the stadium's over there to the left, and you can't miss it. I mean, it is It is yellow.
Yeah, football's a different. It just looks different without fans there. It's really hard as a fan to watch. So you said
so they're playing home here pretty soon, and they're going to have some fans there, aren't they? Because I know the governor just said, I think, well, because high school football games over the weekend, they had some fans that were there. So I think there are going to be some fans at the Steelers game. Certainly nowhere near full, but they may.
Such a strange concept. Let's talk about economics for a second, because we've completed the baseball season now, and again, I'm not expecting you to quote me exact statistics, but as a fan of baseball, I always thought that these teams were making so much money on TV revenue and licensing alone that the in-game revenue, the attendance revenue, was kind of a throwaway. And I would think for the Yankees and teams like that have really big licensing and TV deals, how much are they really making there? But in just having a discussion with you off camera, it sounds like your understanding is it's some pretty big money. It's being missed.
Yeah, well, this always comes up with whenever there's like collective bargaining, for like the union contracts and all that stuff. The owners are famous about not revealing, their numbers and, saying exactly how much they're making here or there. They keep that very, very close to the vest, which makes the union say, yeah, you're making tons of money. And then the owners say, no, we're not making that much money. And there's never any
so they don't reveal that stuff?
No. They keep that very close. I mean, they will probably say very broad things, but there's no like balance sheet that comes across. No. They keep that very close to the vest. And
I never thought about that.
I mean, TV revenue, as you know, varies quite a bit across, markets. The Yankees are going to have a far different contract than the Royals, than the Cubs, than the Braves, and the Pirates, right? They're all going to have these different, regional contracts. Major League Baseball has a national contract as a whole, but you've also got these regional ones, right? And that's going to vary a lot across these different markets. It's a big. If I had to take a stab at it, and again, don't quote me on the numbers here, I'd say that revenue from gate receipts and the concessions and all that jazz that happens during the game and parking, it's got to be, it's 25, 30, 35%, maybe more. It's not insignificant. I wouldn't say it's the majority. And again, it would be great to have actual figures on this to actually know, but those teams were hurting. And that's why, come next year, I would bet you a considerable sum of money that all those teams are going to absolutely find a way to get people asses in the seats for 81 games. They need that money. They absolutely need that.
Yeah.
They were hurting this year big time.
Well, there's also all the residual benefits, the economic benefits to the area.
Somewhat. We talk about that in sports econ, whether that's actual, is that actual additional economic activity, or are we just displacing it from somewhere else? So, for example,
that's deep.
First time I taught, I think it was the first time I taught sports econ. There was a girl in the class, and we got on this topic of displacement. And she's, I said, are we actually generating new spending here? Or are we just, I have a chunk of entertainment dollars I've allocated, and if the Pirates are playing, I'll allocate it to the Pirates, and if the Pirates aren't playing, I'll go take my kids to the movies.
Okay.
Or what have you, right? And that's, or if the Pirates playing, do I do movies and Pirates? Am I actually saving less and consuming more and actually generating, or are we just moving it somewhere else? And she said, that's a really good point. She says, I work at American Eagle or whatever, at the clothing store, right? Just working. That's my job on the weekends.
Right. And
whenever there's Steelers games, she's like, the store's just like empty, so it's just this idea that, the pandemic makes it interesting because, people are saving a lot more now. I believe there were figures that came out a couple months ago. I think the national savings rate was 8 to 10%, I want to say.
Right.
And then the pandemic hit and people didn't have anything to spend money on. And so that savings rate, and then we're also, concerned about their financial well-being. Savings rate are up now. It's 25, close to 30%, I believe. So if we take that as the state of the world, okay, and then all of a sudden sports come back and people revert to 8%, just by virtue of sports, that's way too big of a assumption. But if it's actual new spending, then you could say it's going to be economically beneficial. But if it's just transferred from somewhere else, I'm going to go to 1 or 2 fewer Pirates games this year because the Who are having their final tour and I want to go see them. So I'm going to allocate my money over there. If that's the case, you're not really seeing new spending in the area.
Boy, reallocations adds a whole new dimension to that conversation that I would never have thought about.
It's part of, we have unit in sports econ we just do for state and local public finance, which talks about hosting the Olympics, which talks about, does it make sense to build a big publicly funded stadium? Does it make sense to try and does it make sense to try and attract a franchise to move from another place? So just, it's not saying that there couldn't be benefits. It's that we just need to outline the framework under which we can understand those benefits to happen. And if it's just displacement, that's because, a lot of times people talk about that when they host, like every 3 years, Duquesne hosts the NCAA basketball tournament, right? They have it down at PPG. And they always like to come out and say, well, look at how much economic benefit there is to the area. We've got all these people spending money on all these tickets, and we've got the restaurants have those people on this and that. It's like, yeah, well, go to the other side of town where all those people came from and see the money that they're not spending there, that they're now deciding to spend down there. So it's very, very easy when you do economic analyses or people try to argue for hosting these events or building these stadiums. It's very, very easy on many margins to overestimate the benefit.
So the overall takeaway I get from that statement is that because you create this event does not necessarily mean the region is going to see additional funds. It's just going to be the existing funds that were going to be spent anyways, maybe more reallocated to your event.
Right. And I mean, it's not that the benefit's going to be zero. It's just that it's really, really easy to overstate it by a bunch. There's multipliers that go into it. We have to realize how much of the
town
spending
revenue, though, right?
Out of town would be something you want to consider. So, but then there's also going to be money that you spend in that area that go to, let's say you go to the Pirates game and you buy yourself a Sam Adams. Well, that's going in our simple little model. That's going to Boston. That's not. So there's things that not only people coming out in, people from outside spending money in, that would be money that we didn't get, but there's also people here that are spending money that's going outside of the area too. So just a lot of things, just like little check boxes to check off. But the run of the mill is those estimates, because you'll say, oh, we're hosting the Super Bowl and there's going to be, $400 million benefit. Those studies have been pretty soundly refuted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Something is just missing, though. The sports are great. We need them, and I don't want a city without them or a season without them.
Sure.
But this form of no fan attendance or the word participation, no fan participation,
sure,
it really cuts at the core of the event.
I didn't think it would. These events, when we're watching them on TV, it's the same players doing the same thing they've done their whole life, and they're really, really good at it, regardless of the sport. I didn't realize how much of a role fans really play in the production of the product at the end of the day. It's just there's something that's. I love baseball, and I'll keep watching baseball, and I enjoy it. But there's just, like I said about the hockey playoffs, it wasn't it. It just wasn't. It wasn't what we've come to know and consume with sports,
We took them for granted. You took it for granted the fans were there.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I certainly miss going to games this summer, but I never really realized how much of the experience, even when watching on TV, the fact of having fans there cheering is. And I guess if I had to look forward, I would think if where fans could have a huge impact. I'm curious. I haven't watched any yet, but college football, the fans are such a big thing in college football. And so
I've not seen a game yet, have you?
No, I think I flipped through one maybe last week. But there are some locales that are letting some fans in, and some locales that aren't. But it's going to be interesting. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of studies done on. We have this whole year now where we had events without fans. What sort of concrete outcome differences do we see? Do our road teams winning a lot more than home, more than they used to in the past? Or do players in clutch situations perform better when people aren't, whatever. I mean, there's gonna be all sorts of studies that just look at this.
You love that stuff.
I do. It's interesting. It's
interesting to me too.
I'm sure those stories will come out eventually.
Let's talk a little bit about the players' experiences. We can pick a couple. Let's start with baseball.
Sure.
I want to give the entire league and the entire field of players from all teams a pass almost this year in grading them as a player. I mean, generally, your superstars did relatively pretty well, as expected. There's some outliers.
Yeah, there was some. Yeah, there was.
Houston was a big outlier during the regular season.
Yeah, they had some guys that didn't their good guys didn't do too well until they made the playoffs.
Yeah,
of course,
let's not talk about that. But, no, but that's an example where, and they had other issues going on there, right? But they got kind of a break in the pandemic in some odd way because they didn't have to face the fan scorn.
I guess, yeah. Though I bet on net. I feel like they were doing interviews with some players that were saying, even when I'm out there on the road, like I like the fans there. It's part of baseball. It's what they've done their whole life. I mean,
Right.
they sit there and they're playing in front of people, and that's what they're used to. And
Yeah.
even if they're, they would even say when they're on the road, even if they're jeering you, that is it.
Is that a component when you look at if you really dive into the numbers? Then providing we come back and we slowly come back to normal next year, sports wise, will they look at this year? How will they look at this year? From a wagering
they're trying to have as normal of a football season as possible. So
Yeah.
I've got to figure that if football kind of holds the course, and they've had a few test cases here and there, but by and large, as of this taping, they're kind of hanging it together.
Right.
Steelers got postponed. Anyway.
Tennessee has some issues.
Right, but by and large, it's they haven't had to shut down the season yet anyway.
Yeah.
So I've got to figure that come February, whoever wins the Super Bowl will probably be felt that was somewhat
Normal.
so long as we continue on this path of having the games and everything.
The baseball can't feel that though. 60 games
doesn't feel that way. Not when you let
fans?
Not when you let the 16 teams into the playoffs and you're having really, really short series.
Houston shouldn't have been there in the first place.
I think everyone's kind of going through the motions, and people like to see baseball. And I think when it's done, we're going to say, well, we had this really unique tournament in 2020, and that's who ended up kind of hoisting the trophy. But 2020 was a unique year, and
There's an
it's not like-
asterisk there.
yeah, maybe. I mean, they'll still be the World Series champion. I don't think they would put an asterisk. I think that's what I think is going to happen. I think that's going to happen with education too this year. We're doing everything we can, teaching and everything, and the students are really, really resilient, to be honest with you, and everyone's giving it the good college try, no pun intended. But I think people are going to look back, whether it's employers or graduate schools, I think they're going to look back at this academic year and be like, you took these classes and that's good, and I'm glad and sure you retained some stuff, but if it comes to GPAs or scores and stuff like that, this was just a weird year.
Yeah.
We all went through it. We understand that.
Yeah.
But if you see a student, A's, A minuses, B pluses, A's, A minuses, B pluses, all in their transcript, and then they have this year, and they got some C's, let's say. It's everyone's doing the best they can. Everyone's doing the best they can, and
But it's not uniform for academia because it happened in March.
right. No, I know that. I think with sports, and I think with academics, and I think with a lot of things, people, when did that happened in 2020? Okay, we understand.
Well, I hope that's where we get to.
Yes.
That means we've healed as a country.
Yes,
then,
yes.
right?
So I think people are just going to take a lot of things with a grain of salt, and so for the baseball season, I think they're going to do that. Hockey was interesting. I mean, they let in a bunch of teams, though the Sharks even still didn't make it, and kind of had like a playing round. I know, but they still
Penn's
had
got bounced first round.
Yeah, I think they still played 7-game series all the way through though, so that even felt okay. I don't really follow the NBA too much, so I'm not sure how people are taking that
Right.
sort of situation. It's just
Visually, it looks strange. Now, some people say to me on television, the NBA looks not too bad. To me, when I see it, because the fans are right up on that court,
right.
it's odd not seeing them there.
Because have they decided it for the NBA or the NHL? Because usually they're ramping up to get started their next season, and the NBA is still not done yet as of the time we're taping this.
I hope they go back to a normal schedule.
Well, they'd have to start in like a month.
Oh well. I mean,
yeah, I guess. I mean,
but eventually you're going to have to make that correction. Like, what are you going to do? Just run 3 or 4 seasons this way, and then?
Well, I mean, I guess what they could do is just run another abbreviated season and then start for a new one in 2021. But they don't want to take games away. That's revenue. They're not doing that.
Right. That's the problem with moving the season forward. And they talked about that in football, didn't they? There was talk about moving the college season forward.
Yeah, there was. I know it was on the table at some point to do it in the spring, which wouldn't be. I mean, the weather would be cold in a lot of places, but it's not like those stadiums are getting used for anything else. I mean,
Right.
the logistics of it, everyone would be kind of off kilter in terms of training.
Mm-hmm.
But everything's kind of off kilter as it is now anyway, with all the
Right.
protocols and the testing and all that. So,
Right.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I when all of this happened and then they announced they're going to have these brief playoffs, to kind of, because people want sports and it's,
No question. We need it.
It's yes, and it's helping people think about other things,
No question.
which is good.
No question.
When I thought, I'm like, no one's going to take any of this seriously at all. And people are taking it a little more seriously in terms of the championship and the winning nature of it.
People want to win.
They do want to win. I just, I think the question when we were talking before was, well, how much stock are people really going to put in this NHL thing when we invite 24 teams and we do all this? And it's like, well, in retrospect, people were kind of happy Tampa Bay ended up winning at the end of the day. So they kind of have this sense of they went through all their growing pains and now they finally won their Stanley Cup because they've been pretty good for a while. And people seem to give them more credit than I would have thought they would a couple months ago when we were talking. So
well, that city may have a pretty good year here if the Rays kind of pan out, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I know the Tampa Bay Lightning are really very well attended down there. They draw really, really well because I think their stadium is downtown, whereas the baseball stadium's all the way. I'm sure you've been down there, but the stadium's like all the way over in St. Petersburg, I think, which is just a hall.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was because people go to Tampa Bay football games. NFL games are pretty well attended regardless.
Right.
But
they got Brady now to draw.
That's true. I forgot about then Gronkowski too.
Yep. Yep.
Because everyone always says, oh, Tampa Bay's a horrible sports town. No one goes and sees the Rays and they're good. It's like, well, the Lightning actually draw really well down there. And they would think that if they...
Hockey in Florida draws well.
Yeah.
Go figure, right? Yeah. Didn't work in Atlanta.
They've won a couple Stanley Cups now. I think Tampa Bay has.
Right. Right.
Yeah. No, I think there's always talk, the A's and the Rays are like the two teams that need new stadiums. And there was talk of if Tampa Bay was going to get a new stadium, I would have to put it downtown because that would draw immediately really, really well. Because it's a fun team. They're like the A's. They're a fun team to watch. They're young. They're well run.
Right.
They're pretty innovative in how they kind of strategically throughout the game.
Right.
But no one goes, and you can't I don't want to drive half an hour to go sit in that stadium.
Well, I want to end the show in a while on those two teams in particular. So you kind of beat me to the punch. I want to talk about small market teams and some effectiveness of how that happens, because obviously it's not happening in Pittsburgh.
No, not yet.
Not yet. But before we get there, talk a little bit about how difficult it must have been for bookmakers and odds makers this year on all four major sports, because the variable was, how are these players going to react in this environment, even the ones that were especially the ones that were in the bubble environment?
Yeah. I know. So last time I was here, I was talking about kind of uncertainty and how, at least in my research, you could leverage uncertainty in certain situations to find like profitable wagering opportunities.
Right.
And I think I must have mentioned something last time where it's like, wow, the uncertainty's through the roof here in baseball. It would seem like the underdogs would be really, really good to bet on. So I haven't run the numbers, but there was an article like a month ago. It was still during the regular season, that on one Sunday during the baseball season, there were 13 games. I think 12 favorites won. So
oh, really? So much for that theory.
I think my prediction crashed and burned. That was just one day.
But there wasn't any home field advantage of any real significance, was there?
Yeah, it's worth. I'll have a student go grab the data and can just run the numbers. The season's over now, and so all the data are out there. I'd be curious. I can report back next time I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have a student track that down and see, because the theory that's unfortunately not a whole lot of games, because usually we like to have like tens of thousands of games, and this is only going to be 60, 1,800 lines. So, it's better than nothing. It is what it is. I can't do anything about that. I can't have these crazy. I can't make 40 crazy pandemic seasons, so I have a good data set.
No. But so the players.
A lot of uncertainty. Than there's uncertainty at the beginning of every baseball season, and this is just piled on top of it.
The numbers are going to be fascinating when this is all said and done. Just especially for yourself to go back and look at them.
Markets are very, very strong and very, very efficient, and so while I would like to think there's going to be some gold mine of kind of treasure to unearth at the end of the day, they're probably going to be pretty close to efficient, and it's probably going to be pretty close to zero. Just don't get too excited.
Well, can we be so lucky? The argument can be made, though, they're all professionals.
Yes.
This is what they've been doing since they were children. In the end of the day, their optics might look a little different when they're going through the process, but they're doing what they know. Right? Yeah,
but yes, they are doing what they know, and if you could find any group of people that could best handle that, it obviously would be the professional players. But they had an off season, last off season. Okay. So who was it? The Nationals won the World Series. So everyone has an off season. You've got some players moving around, changing teams, Garrett Cole and all that, right?
Right.
Moving around.
Right.
Spring training, right, starts up and they're doing their thing. Then shut it down, right, midway through March. And then all these guys go wherever for like 3 months, wasn't it? About 3 months?
Right.
And,
Some trained and some didn't.
Right. Are they playing catch in the backyard? Are they, do they have gyms at home to work out in? Because gyms were shut down too. Are they able to still train?
Right.
You're trying to build up in spring training for a pitcher. You're trying to build up arm strength for the season. So do you keep building up? Do you just is it like off season again? Do you wait till you get back and build? It was something they just no one had ever dealt with. There wasn't really a protocol for this. And so, are some people more suited psychologically or physically for this better than others? Yeah, probably. But no one knew who or what that was going to be, and they came back and did they even play any, they came back and they had their bubbled kind of camps that they did with their players.
Right.
I can't remember. I think the Pirates maybe played a couple scrimmage games against the Indians.
Was a couple, yeah.
Maybe just a couple
right.
to get back into game. And all of a sudden you're throwing them out there because you got to get up to game speed. And it was just the uncertainty was through the roof. So I put my flag in the sand on that one. So we'll see. We'll see what the numbers have to say.
When you talk about uncertainty, there's so many factors that could be involved, and now you have a situation where there's this overall uncertainty of just being in a new environment, right?
And I mean, just every piece of uncertainty that you'd have in normal times, I think, just got magnetized, magnified. Excuse me. There's always surprise teams every year. Miami ended up making the playoffs.
Yeah.
And they were okay.
Yeah.
And they won a series, actually. So no one would have guessed that. It's just that's a horrible team. There's no good players on there. So there's all of that uncertainty that's naturally baked into the season to start with.
Okay.
And then add into that all of the training weirdness and the fact that players haven't gotten together in 3 months. And maybe some of them are doing long toss and maybe some of them are just running and staying in shape. It's just, I don't know, and there wasn't even... Not only do we not know the impact of all the different training regimens, you don't even know what people were doing what. Was Garrett Cole throwing the whole time? I just don't know. No one.
The pitching numbers have to be fascinating to watch. I mean, it seemed like what was expected kind of happened, though.
It seemed, and I don't have the numbers to back this up, it seemed to me that scoring was a little less than normal. Did you get that sense?
It
seemed like scoring was less. Maybe it just took
the playoffs, but definitely in the regular season.
Yeah, right. Maybe it just took the batters a little longer to get caught up. Just up to game speed and facing. I mean, you can't. You could be in your backyard with your batting cage that you have all you want.
Right.
You can't simulate facing these guys.
I'd love to see what the power numbers are this year. I'd love to see that. It seems
to me. I mean, especially in the playoffs, especially in that A's series, it was just. I mean, it's 3 outcome baseball. It's just. It just seems to be home run derby these days. Which you may like or you may not, but it was.
Are they teaching that now? Is it we talk about launch angle and all this stuff? Is to get that elevated?
I mean, sabermetrically, it makes sense for people to it's become pitchers need to strike people out. They can't score against you if they're not getting on base. They got to be able to hit the ball. So it's people are looking to lift the ball at the expense of maybe striking out a little bit more. So that's where the game is going.
Yeah, and speaking of tactics too,
I just wonder. It makes me wonder how someone like how would Greg Maddux pitch today? Which is just interesting to think of. I mean, I guess you could always think of how
he'd be good.
Yeah, but I mean, so let's say they're bringing him up, and people forget he could reach 95 when he was younger if he needed it.
His early years, yeah.
Would he have been taught to be a strikeout pitcher as opposed to induce weak contact kind of a? I don't know. It's just. You could always think about this different eras of different players of how would they be.
But it's hard though because skill sets continue to get better and better. Strength continues to get
right.
There's more strength in the swings, right?
He could get again he could get the velocity if he needed it when he wanted it. But he was more of a crafty pitcher, more of pitch to soft contact. Would he have even been identified as a top prospect these days because he's not trying to throw the ball by people? I tend to think a friend of mine has got me onto this. Line of thinking. I would like to think that if you took the best players of any generation and dropped them in any other generation, they'd still be successful. 'cause people say, "Oh, Babe
In
Ruth."
baseball.
Yeah, I mean,
Can't do that in football.
well, I mean, I'd like to think that if Jim Brown played today, he'd probably be effective.
Do you think? Do you honestly think so?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, do you think Barry Sanders would be effective if he played today? I feel like the very, very is what getting you about football is the physical aspect of it. Mm-hmm. Okay, I guess what I'd say to that is if those players were growing up in this day and age and had access to the same stuff, they would physically be able to Clearly, you can't transplant Babe Ruth from the 20s to now, right? But if Babe Ruth grew up now and I'd like to think that Willie Mays could be successful today. I'd like to think that Joe DiMaggio could be successful today.
But the pitching better today?
It is, but so is what we know about hitting, and so is their opportunity to be able to hitting like that.
Got it.
Like you can't just drop Garrett Cole on Babe Ruth. Like that's
yeah. I think about Jack Lambert of the Steelers being 195 pounds.
Yeah.
In middle linebacker, and middle linebackers today are 270 to 280.
Yeah. It's watching some of those old clips, like watching O.J. Simpson play. He's like bigger than the people running after him, and he's faster than them too. Like he was just a physical marvel on the football field. And I feel like I didn't watch Jim Brown as much, or I guess highlights of Jim Brown as much, but I feel like he was much the same way, just big and fast. Which I mean, obviously is the name of the game in football, but I mean, linemen were 230 pounds, and O.J. Simpson was 230 pounds, and he's just running faster than the smaller people down the field.
So. I think there's going to be some players probably based upon their success level and their physical attributes will fit into today's. Like Eric Dickerson was a phenomenal, statistically a phenomenal running back for a long time.
Sure.
But he never took any square hits. He ran out of bounds a lot.
Yeah.
He was smart about how he managed his body.
Emmitt Smith did much the same thing.
Yeah, so. I don't know how they weren't bruisers, so I don't know how they would fare today.
Yeah, maybe I'll just stick to baseball on that one.
Oh, I'm
with you on that. Football is such a. I mean, it's the name of the game in football is to try to avoid getting clocked as much as possible. I mean, really,
no doubt.
I grew up a 49ers fan, and whenever they're on, I still try and watch them.
Right.
And that was the thing about Joe Montana. He just never really got squared up and hit that hard. Well,
very rarely.
The playoff game he got blasted, but. Yeah. He was really good at kind of avoiding hits. Jerry Rice was really good at kind of. I'm not saying they never got lit up, but if you could get lit up, people, those running backs. I remember they've had interviews, and I mean, my God, these huge people just slamming you. I mean, just play after play.
It made Barry Sanders amazing. It made Walter Payton amazing.
Yeah,
Payton would dish it out as well as
some running back in the last 10 years was doing an interview, and he's like. He goes, I get in 16 car wrecks a year. He's like, I feel like I've been in a car wreck after every game. Just brutal. It's just
crazy,
unbelievable the punishment there. Yeah. I'm not as much into football as I used to be.
Right.
But it's a lot of punishment, and I'm trying to think at what level. Because I like watching college football, I like the pageantry of it and stuff, but. I feel like after watching the NFL for a while, I think it did wear on me just watching people get hurt and people get hurt and people get hurt and people get hurt,
Right.
Whereas I don't feel like I saw that as much in college, maybe. I mean, the NFL, man, it's like every other play.
Yeah.
These are huge people.
Yeah. What about the betting? How's the gambling work, the differences between the NFL and college football? Player rotation happens a lot because they're in and out, right? In terms of like they're here for 3-4 years, they're gone.
Sure.
You get Montana, he's in there for 12 years.
Well, right, for sure. I mean, now you seem in college to see more like coaching franchises, if you will. So like Saban's at Alabama, and that's like kind of the franchise there, and he just keeps bringing the people in, but he's kind of like the linchpin there.
Okay.
Swinney at Clemson.
Okay.
Right, and then I think it's Ryan Day is at Ohio State, who kind of took over for Urban Meyer. And
right.
You see kind of those are kind of like the franchises that I see, kind of the stability of it there that you would see with the players in the NFL.
And then just interchangeable parts. Because the NFL's kind of
college
like
football is recruiting. I mean, that's the name of the game is recruiting. Okay.
It's the only game.
I mean, look, so you've got several programs that are getting all the really, really good players, right? That are focused on going to the NFL.
It's like baseball.
Right. You get just a couple programs that get the really, really, really good players, and they're the ones you see, the Alabamas and the Clemsons and the Georgias and the Oklahomas and the not West Virginia, all these big teams, and that's kind of how I view it as more of it's the coaching and the coaching infrastructure is kind of the franchise as opposed to the actual pieces that are on the field. As I would say it's more the opposite in the NFL, whereas you get kind of those players and they become kind of the Big Ben's been the quote unquote foundation or a big important part of the team for a while. That's kind of how I see college football.
But creating the wagering, there's how does that look? The variables are just different because innately the leagues are different, right?
Yeah, I mean the actual wagers themselves are still the same thing. I mean, it's still point spread wagering.
Yeah.
And you can do there's money line wagering on that stuff.
But
too,
the books, I mean, how
they model the hell out of that stuff. I mean,
that was my question.
They're
I guess
pretty good at figuring that stuff out pretty quickly. There's a big incentive to make sure that you do. Right, because if you don't figure it out and your lines are off, there's going to be people out there that know. You have a big profit incentive to make certain that you're understanding what you're offering lines on.
Does the lack of fan participation or the new environment that we're in right now, how does that blanket get thrown over all of that data? Or is there a blanket over top of that?
I mean, if I had to wager a guess, it would be. I mean. Again, point spread wagering is kind of what rules the roost in the NFL. Right. I mean, you might see maybe line. I mean, this is data. We could just go and look this up. I might see point spreads maybe be a little not as extreme. So instead of Alabama being favored by 45, it'd be 40. That's how I would think uncertainty would play out there. But they set the lines, and if they see a lot of movement on one side, then they adjust the lines, accordingly. I'm not saying they're trying to get equal money on both sides, but they're responsive. I mean, they're figuring it out too, but there's a big incentive on both sides to try and figure it out first, right? There's definitely a big incentive on both sides to try and figure it out first, but it'd be interesting. I have not read anything about like how much up or down is wagering on NFL games thus far this year. I have not read. I don't know. I should look into that. Actually, I've not looked into that at all.
You mean the volume of money?
Yeah, just if we spent $40 billion wagering on the NFL last year, are we on pace to hit 40 this year? Are we on pace to do half that, twice as much because people have nothing else to do? Like I just don't know. My sense is that it's down a bit because my sense is that wagering in general is down a bit. People aren't going to Vegas to go do this stuff. But on the other hand, we're having a lot more states that have sports wagering now. So it could be a lot more is being wagered on like apps and stuff as opposed to in person.
Could be.
I just have to look. It could be.
Some of these teams are letting the wagering happen at the events now. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. If we talked about that, where was it? I sent you a note at one point that was saying, was it the Browns that were looking to set up
I think it was
a window?
Yeah.
So what these teams need to figure out, and we talk about this in Sports Econ too, is whether wagering is going to be like a complement or a substitute to the actual games themselves, right? Because the NFL and these teams have a lot at stake to figure this out.
It's an integrity issue too.
There could be an integrity issue, right? But if it's a substitute, right, the teams are going to want to try and keep that away because we want people coming to the games. Okay. If you're either gambling or coming to the games, I want you coming to the games and buying my tickets.
Absolutely.
But if it's a compliment, it's like, wow, I'm not going to go to a Browns game. But if I can go to a Browns game and then maybe bet on how many touchdowns Mayfield's going to have this or whatever, I don't know, like some wager you could have. Wow, I'd be like, that sounds fun, right? So if it's a compliment, then they need to encourage that. And I think that's kind of whatever they're looking at, they think it might be, it might be a compliment.
So it would operate like a racetrack up there.
I don't know the nuts and bolts of how precisely it would operate, but yeah, there'd be some sort of presumably window with someone that's taking wagers, and they, I would think the way more things are going, they would want to promote maybe like a Cleveland Browns specific app for wagering, as opposed to having like a physical window that's manned by someone, or maybe it's both. Because
is the window needed if everybody's
that's the thing, is if you could
walking
just do it right, if you just do it with the app, then the money's already in there and the payoff you could just
but
set
I've
it.
seen they're putting betting windows in some of these stadiums now. It's crazy. Think about if we had this conversation even 20 years ago,
10 years ago.
it would sound like
hearsay.
Yeah, not even like. Are you kidding me? Sports, or the NFL endorsing gambling in any capacity?
Yeah,
or Major League Baseball?
Yeah, it was really it was very it was not okay for commissioners to even mention this, right? Because of, the history generally for baseball, I think, is where everyone gets spooked from this idea of gambling, getting in and ruining the integrity of the game.
Right.
So even bringing it up was just like, I'm not touching that with a 30-foot pole. Like they're just staying away from it. And I think it was Adam Silver of the NBA that really started talking about it and looking into it. And then of course the ruling in by the Supreme Court in New Jersey that
changed everything.
Now, if there's I would say at this point, so there were different states. So like we could sports wager in Pennsylvania, but you can't do it right now in Ohio. Different states had different. So the legislature has to pass like a bill to like make this happen. It's just the Supreme Court just means it wasn't legal anymore.
All right.
So different states had different legislation in different stages. I think Pennsylvania had their like bill kind of ready to go in anticipation of that ruling if it went a certain way.
Okay.
So that ruling happened. They passed it was like it was bipartisan. Like it was everyone passed it. It was fine.
Right.
And so it kind of got the process going pretty quick in Pennsylvania. Other states weren't quite at the ready to the degree that Pennsylvania and some other states were. So we're heading down the path of, I would be shocked if any of the 50 states didn't allow it or didn't pass something eventually. We just have different states at different stages of like kind of adopting it. But yeah, no, they do it here in Pennsylvania, and just, you could live bet during sports games. What's the next batter going to do? What's the next play going to be? Things like that.
I remember when, I guess it was in early 90s, and before the NFL games at 1, even before probably the pregame shows at noon, if you went to some of the other cable channels, you would see these independently run infomercials from these sports experts, and they give you the lines, and you get the total, and and it was so novel and so kind of cheesy. And to think that,
but it also had this feel
where we've come from then, though.
I know, no, absolutely, and it also had this feel of like sketchiness too. Like it had this feel.
It was great.
I know. And I mean, so you said even 20 years ago, you said, what if, you talked to 20 years ago, Eric, right? And you said in the year 2020, you could be able to go to a football game and just gamble on it right there, straight up at a window, and you would laugh at yourself, right? But even, you don't even have to go that far. Even in like 2020, you said on ESPN and the like crawler on the bottom, wagering all over it. ESPN's giving you all the lines for everything. You'd be like, there's no way they'd do that. They're not getting involved with that. It's amazing. Like, I tell my sports econ kids this. I'm sure I mentioned this last time I was here, but just in the 8 or 10 years I've been teaching sports econ at Duquesne, even just in that time, the embracing of gambling. Because I remember I always have a section on wagering markets because it's a good way to understand efficiency, and it's just, it's good, and it's data driven, and I think it's good for the kids to work through that stuff.
Okay.
And I remember the first time I taught sports econ, let's say 2012, somewhere in that range. And I remember going into class and giving that lecture, and the students are just like we're talking, like we could be talking about this. It's like they're just markets. They're just markets. That's all they are. It's okay to talk about this. And so then they finally loosened up. But I mean, they're in the classrooms at Duquesne. They all have a crucifix up on the wall, and they're like looking at that, like, I don't think they're gonna like, it's okay.
Real little version of Touchdown Jesus.
That's right, in all the classrooms. Yep.
No,
but to be fair, I've never gotten any flack from anyone for talking about wagering markets at all. Whether it's Duquesne's been fine about anything I've researched or ever taught. To be honest, they've been nothing but supportive.
Well, it's gambling is going back.
We try not to use that word. Try to use wagering.
I know.
Try to use wagering.
But when you play, so are you wagering when you buy a lottery ticket?
Yeah,
theoretically,
absolutely.
Yeah, same thing.
Same when you're buying insurance.
Yeah,
or not buying insurance.
So gambling's for Uncle Vito down the block when he wants to. He opens up his little book and writes down.
When you're throwing the craps. That's gambling. Wagering is.
That's fair enough. I remember being a kid and watching Howard Cosell, Dandy Don, and I want to say it was it Tony Kubek?
Was that the original? Baseball. Was that the original lineup for Emma?
I don't go back that far. 71 was the first year, right, or something like that. I'm talking mid-70s now.
Okay.
So who was it then? It was Dandy Don. It was, it It wasn't Al Michaels yet, I don't think. It was
No, I don't
Howard
think so.
Cosell,
You're
Danny
gonna know,
Don.
I'm not going to know this one.
Danny Don, and there was a quarterback, wasn't there?
What's the name of one?
Oh my gosh, yes. I thought so. Oh, yes. Joe Namath.
Was it Namath?
So it was Namath, Namath,
Okay.
Dandy Don, and it was, and the game was between the Browns and somebody. And of course, it's Namath out of the three. He's the one to say, well, if they get that touchdown there, there's going to be a lot of happy people tonight. I remember he got in a lot of trouble doing that. That was the first time as a child I recognized he's talking about the over-under.
It's amazing, right? It's amazing just even to go back and see old broadcasts. Do you remember when they found that that tape of Game 7 of the 1960s World Series and Bing Crosby's?
No. What's this?
wind-up?
Wait, back up.
This was like 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
Okay.
Bing Crosby actually had a house in the Bay Area. He was part owner of the Pirates. I didn't know this until this whole story came out. He was part owner of the Pirates and was, during the 1960 World Series, was evidently, I'm going to probably get some small details wrong, but the general gist of the story is correct. He was really superstitious, so he didn't want to watch the 1960 World Series. So he was like out of the country in, I don't know, Paris or something like that. He was out of the country, but he had people at his house in Hillsborough in the Bay Area.
Okay.
Record the game so we could watch it after the fact when he came home.
All right.
And it was on some old like cellulose, reel thing. And he had it and I guess watched it whenever and then put it in like his wine cellar. And if he hadn't done that, that cellulose breaks down after whatever, but the
Right.
temperature was so perfectly controlled that it was still like legit. So they found this tape of Game 7 of the 1960 World Series and they made like a whole big show of it. I can't remember. You don't remember this?
I did not
Really?
see that. No.
That Major League Baseball Network rented out the biome. And they brought, this was like 8 years ago, 10 years ago.
How I
They
missed
rented out the
that.
biome. They like showed it live for the first time. They brought back like,
Wow.
all sorts of people. But it's funny because it's the actual broadcast and the announcers. That was a 10-9 game, by the way. That took 2.5 hours to finish, by the way.
Yeah, go figure. Right?
So
That's amazing.
they're showing the broadcast and Bob Costas, interspersing, and they have, people like Mazeroski's there. So anyway, so they're doing this whole broadcast and Clemente comes up to bat. Bobby Clemente. Because they felt Roberto would like alienate too many people watching the game. Like we can't handle the word Roberto.
Oh my gosh.
It's just funny when you look at
Wow.
that's not funny.
Well,
but
Bob Prince used to say Bobby all the time.
I didn't know that. But it was right there on the screen. Like Costas talked about it, like during the broadcast. It's like,
How
they
about
wouldn't
that?
say.
That's crazy.
So it's something to see, what social norms are across,
Right.
how they just change
Yeah.
over time. Because talking about gambling in 1970, I'm surprised they didn't like fire him for that.
Yeah, it was late. It was mid to late 70s, and there was
Yeah.
a reference that, and Namath could have been, drinking a little bit on the air. We have no idea.
I think we do have an idea.
So, before you go today, I want to talk a little bit about and really kind of try to vet this out and get your thoughts. And it's a broad question, but it gnaws at me every year around this time of the year. What is the secret from some of these small market teams to thrive in a structure which is not geared for them to strive?
It's interesting. To a degree now, baseball has almost people always, the lament over the last, say the 90s and the 2000s.
Okay.
Oh, like, well, just the Yankees or the Red Sox, they just go buy everyone and they go and they win, right? Like, just like they go buy everyone. Mm-hmm. And over the last handful of years, what's starting to emerge is even those big teams, and they do spend a lot on salary, I understand that, but the importance of having cost-controlled talent is pervasive even amongst big market teams and small market teams.
Like, what do you mean?
The Dodgers, right? So the Dodgers have certainly signed some free agents and, have extended people and kept people around for certain, right? But, every year they're bringing up, you've got Bellinger and you've got Gavin Lux and you've got, it's just like, and Dustin May and, just like all these young guys, right? That's also complement, having those young controllable players allows them, in light of the luxury tax, right, out there, allows them to pay some people, a market rate that's going to be really high,
right?
But they've got cost control over like the other third of their roster, and that wasn't always the way that those teams operated and how they were run. But teams like the A's and the Rays have kind of always had to find cost controlled talent and develop that, and be strategic in when you could flip players for additional prospects. It's just we were talking before we started here, it's got to be like Billy Beane must just love his job so much, because short of that, it's got to be exhausting. But not exhausting, but just it would seem to wear you down after year after year after year after year of seeing teams develop some good players and then sign them to extensions,
Right.
and then they stay around and they play, and then they have a good chunk of a career somewhere, and that's what they do. Whereas that can never be. You can't really do that. Right, like
like Chapman's an example.
Simeon's going to be the same way, right? I mean, it's going to be someone. He's a good player. He was like last 2019. He was in like MVP discussion.
Right.
He didn't win, but like he was good. He was very good.
Right.
And it's got to be frustrating at some level, somehow at the end of the day, that you don't have
develop these players.
You develop them, and you just don't have. You want to be able to sign them and keep them, but for whatever reason, and maybe say the owner's cheap, or whatever, like whatever the reason is, that's just not on the table. And you see, the Dodgers are just churning it out right now. I mean, you have to be impressed. They go, yes, they went and traded for Mookie Betts and signed him to a big extension. Okay, that's not something a lot of teams can do, but it's not like he's the only player there. I mean, they're just bringing out every year.
Right. So the money goes beyond. So the money, and this is where I think the average fan doesn't get it, because it's too easy to say that the big money is there to buy the high-priced veteran.
That luxury tax, though, is doing it. Wanted to be a diversion to teams just spending $200 million a year, and it has been a diversion. It's been a diversion. You are seeing teams now in the offseason, when they are up close to that threshold, they're stopping, and they're planning for cost control in the future, and they know where they're at and who they can sign.
So it's working.
If work is, we don't want people spending above this amount, they've created enough of a diversion to get teams' attention.
Well, that goes against free markets, though.
Well, this is a whole private league. This isn't the government getting involved.
I understand. No, I understand what you're saying, but from a competitive standpoint,
I mean, European soccer is not that way. That's not exactly true, but you could see a much bigger disparity in spending across European soccer. I'll say it that way.
Okay.
There are financial fair play rules, but they're kind of relative to how much money you bring in versus like you can't spend more than this much. Yeah, I mean it's a diversion. I mean GMs. Maybe I'm not sure GMs can ever use that language, but people that are analyzing these teams, like the Cubs, they have been talking about whether they're going to trade Chris Bryant or not.
Right.
And you're like, the Cubs, that's a big market team. They're up against the threshold. Like it's making them have to,
but it's
not
an
just buy
unwritten
everybody.
threshold, isn't it?
No, it's clarified. It's like if you spend more, they clarify it every year. So if your payroll is if it's a full season, obviously not a truncated season, it's like $208 million, something like that. It changes year by year. I'd have to look at the most recent.
How much is that tax if they go over?
So it's I should have looked this up before I went. It is something to the effect of the first year you go over, it's like 20% of the amount that you go over. So if you're over by like 10 million, you pay 20%, so 2 million.
Okay.
If you go over for a second straight year, it's like 30%. Third straight year, it's like 40%. Those numbers are not exactly right, but it's an increasing scale. I know the top, if you go over like 3 years in a row, 50%. So what you hear about these teams doing is resetting the tax.
Got it.
Get that 1 year where you're under there.
Got it.
They're happy to pay, let's say you're, a little bit over 1 year, maybe pay $5 million in tax, whatever, just like a little bit over, and then you're back below. It's really not that big a deal. But if you're over and over and over, I mean, that starts hitting.
Builds.
Yeah. The Yankees, I believe, had gone over a couple years in a row, so they wanted to get back down. It's just this idea of the Yankees being cost conscious, or it's humorous to think of, but
it is humorous to think of.
It does make them operate their franchise in a way that, to get back to your original question, that like the A's and the Rays have kind of been having. That's the only way they can compete, is by doing that, is by finding hidden gems and by exploiting market inefficiencies to try and get
near
advantages.
that 200,000 number, the 200 million number.
No. I understand that, but it's just this idea that, I mean, teams. I think teams can't be successful anymore completely ignoring their farm system, right? So there are times, so like the Angels, their farm system is just like depleted. Mm-hmm. There's just like nothing there, and you can't be. You need cost controlled assets on these. You do, and they're just trades and bad signings, and maybe not drafting terribly well. Just all those things. You have to have a functional player development program. And I think at the end of the day, that's what led to the Pirates clearing house, was because they weren't drafting necessarily poorly. But like we said kind of before we started, let's look at this Yankees-Rays series. Garrett Cole started the first game, and then Glasnow started the second, and Charlie Morton started the third. These are Austin Meadows is hitting home runs down there, and we're seeing, I think management or the owner finally got tired of seeing, we have acquired assets that are capable Major League Baseball players and then some that don't end up doing terribly well here. So I think the idea was, got to get people in that could, proven to be player development specialists. And that's what Cherington was in Boston. Right. He was out of there before they actually won the World Series. But Betts and Jackie Bradley and all those guys, Benintendi, all those guys for the Red Sox that kind of was the foundation of them winning the World Series a couple of years back, in 2018, I think it was. Those were all Cherington guys that they brought in and developed. And yeah, so that's what the Pirates think they're getting with this guy. So be optimistic.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to be optimistic as a Pirate fan, or even a casual Pirate fan.
They're fun. How many games do you go to a year, roughly, ballpark?
5. Not many. Usually it was with my kid. There was more when he was younger.
My kids love going to those games. They think it's great. They like being outside, fresh air, running around. Sometimes I can get them to watch half an inning. Sometimes I can get them to watch a little bit. Usually if you just take them over, my kids are still small enough, you just take them over to the bullpen, they'll throw you a ball generally every game.
Yeah.
Which is good. Because you can't get foul balls anymore. Because they roped remember the screen, they screened everything off.
Yeah, so I wonder, that's an interesting, I didn't think about that.
So that's like the only place to get a game ball anymore, is to just go to the bullpen and have them throw you one.
Do you think there's going to be some weird COVID rule that when we do have some fans in the stadium, they're not going to be able to keep the balls?
I'm trying to think. So I sit right behind.
I don't know. I mean,
I sit right behind home plate, and there's obviously a screen right in front of me.
Right.
I think there's a screen on top of me too. Not all parks are like that, so there might, but it's getting really hard to get foul balls just for safety, and I understand.
Yeah, I do too.
With that,
I don't have a problem with that. Were you for or against that extra screen?
I mean, I'm kind of both. At the end of the day, it really doesn't bother me that much, because I used to sit down the right field line like a couple rows from the field, and there were a couple screamers that came, and it's like, I'm always amazed when people would reach for foul balls with their bare hand. I'm like, or even when they catch it with their bare hands, even, to be honest with you. That's
amazing to me.
It's something.
It's amazing to me.
No, I don't have a problem with it. I do. I know. What I've always liked about baseball is just like, you're there at the park, and there's, you may be sitting a little bit away, but there's really nothing between you and the fans or you and the players.
It's intimate.
It is. And I did catch a foul ball a couple years back, and that's really was a very fun memory. And I also had an outfielder throw me a ball. It's just, that's not something you're never going to have.
I caught Jeffrey Leonard's home run.
Did you really?
In '87.
Nice. In the playoffs.
It was the Three River Stadium. I was in left field, and I was in the general admission seats right above the wall. Well, above the wall.
No, that wouldn't have been the playoffs, because it was the Cardinals and the Giants that year.
It was
playoffs.
80. Yeah, it was Pirates were starting to build their team with.
That was the year he hit all the home runs, though, wasn't it, Jeffrey Leonard?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was the weirdest thing. I remember sitting there, and he hit, and I was with my buddy. It was an evening game. We were baseball fanatics.
Yeah.
When he hit that ball, I knew it was coming to me, because it was like you're playing catch. You're like, batting practice, and it was like I was down the field waiting the ball to come to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing's
That's
coming.
wild.
And it took two hands. It didn't hurt though.
Really?
And I was like, I caught this ball. Now, meanwhile, I don't think anybody was watching, but it was.
How many beers in were you?
Yeah, I had a couple. I was in a couple, but I did catch it though, and I still have that
impressive.
ball. Jeffrey Leonard, 0-0.
0-0.
Giants.
That's right.
Yeah, night game.
Left field, I think.
87. And
he was popular.
He was
in
a
the
right
Bay
fielder, I think. Yeah. They called him Penitentiary Face because he always had a mean look. That was his nickname, Penitentiary Face. And he had this mean look on his. He always had a mean look on his face constantly. And I'm going, Penitentiary.
Yeah,
they said that on ESPN. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
That's a nickname in the '80s that wouldn't work today.
No. But they were laughing about it. So because he always was mean looking, always.
He was.
Yeah, Jeffrey Leonard. Huh?
Jeffrey Leonard. That's a throwback.
Yeah, it's a throwback.
That's a guy.
That's a throwback. My overall question to you was, though, do you think it's not the crystal ball thing, but you can have the same amount of payroll on two teams, two cities with their own unique baseball struggles, Pittsburgh and Oakland, but different results?
Sure.
And it again,
Well, I mean,
the
that's the
casual
nice
thing
thing.
is we're going to buy free agents. We're going to sign free agents. No, it's not about doing that. It's developing a farm system and being able to coach them, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where baseball has kind of found itself these days. Maybe in a decade, it'll, the model will be different and success will be there. But now, again, it's all about, it's cost controlled talent with this stuff, right? It's being able to have players that, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but players that you could pay not that much money for 3 years and then a little bit more, but certainly not open market, right, with the arbitration and all that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's about cost control. And then if you are, in a situation where you can't supplement in the open market, can or won't, or, A's, Pirates, Rays, there are the teams that really don't go out there and spend a lot. You got to get creative. You need to make trades like the Garrett Cole trade to try and acquire assets. You need to make trades to try and, that's if you're not going to spend, you got to get creative in other ways, right, to try and compete. So
The Pirates involved in that big trade with
I mean, they did it well they had a window there where they, they built up and Huntington built up and they had, what they had.
only 2 years maybe. I mean,
they made the playoffs 3 years in a row.
Okay.
You got to realize over those 3 years,
Okay.
they had the second most wins in baseball.
They did.
They were,
They did.
But that's what that model has to look like. They supplemented a bit in the market. They didn't spend a lot, but they brought in, they would make some trades here and there. I mean, they traded for Marlon Byrd and they had Justin Marneau that 1 year. Jay Happ. They went.
Right.
I mean, they went and got. I'm not saying they went and traded for Joe DiMaggio Jr. and
Right.
paid him $900 million.
Right.
But they did okay. They brought
They
in
were moves. They were moves.
the guy from Korea they brought in that was good for a year.
Kang.
Right.
Called him Kang.
Gung, right, yeah.
Gung.
And McCutcheon was there, and they flipped him for Brian Reynolds. By the way, let's
Yeah.
not forget that. And
Yeah.
I think Crick was part of that deal too. So, I mean, they're doing what they can. It's
Right.
just back to the Billy Bean comment. It's just, man, I feel like the Dodgers can swing and miss on prospects with a little more leverage than the smaller market teams can. Like, they've done a remarkable job bringing up these young players. But let's say a couple of them didn't pan out, where they're still they still have they're still there. Whereas I just feel like the margin for error on those smaller market teams is just,
No question.
I mean, you could, if we want to talk about, people like to say the Chris Archer trade was a bad trade. I'm not here to say it's good or bad, but people can at least in retrospect say that was probably kind of a whiff because he didn't do that good for us and the players down there are doing a little bit better. Boy, the Dodgers make a trade like that. I'm not happy we made the trade,
Right.
but boy, the Pirates
They
make
can
a trade.
recover. They can
Boy,
recover.
that's a tough one to recover from. It's just your margin for error is just so much smaller. But I think you have to enjoy, just from whether it's a management perspective or a sports perspective or whatever perspective you want, can enjoy and appreciate what the A's and the Rays do
Right.
every year,
Year in, year
especially
out.
with the A's in the same
Yeah.
division as the Angels.
I
Because the
know.
Angels spend a shit ton of money.
I know.
and are
And
horrible.
as good as
have
the
the best
Astros
player
and the
have the
Astros.
best player in baseball.
So speaking of that, I was thinking about Trout as you were talking earlier. The odds of seeing that kind of develop a player, superstar player, once in a generation, your top 5 players in your generation,
Oh,
and
yeah,
retain them,
Yeah.
is not something the Pirates, Oakland, Tampa Bay are going to be in a financial position to do. So
Right. The Angels are one of the few teams that
can do it.
Can actually do it and offer him a contract that he's actually going to sign.
Dodgers can do it.
Dodgers could do it.
Yankees can do it if they would actually have the patience to bring someone up like that.
Red Sox could do that too.
Yeah.
People forget the last couple of years the Red Sox have been up at the top of the payroll list. I bet with the new ownership group, I bet you'll see the Mets probably start doing that as well. Now that they got the who bought that? Was it Cohn, the hedge fund guy? So anyway, the Mets just got sold, so I'd be willing to bet they'll start spending a little bit more. Because remember who was it? The Wilpons that owned the Mets previously? They just sold it.
Yeah.
But they got messed up with the Madoff stuff. So their finances were always why is this New York team not spending money? You're in New York. Well, that was kind of a unique situation. But I bet they'll probably start spending more now. I don't think they avoided spending. They weren't not up to the level that the Yankees were.
Major League Baseball, how is it structured as an organization compared to the NFL? Is the NFL an entity that holds each of the teams very tightly controlled, whereas Major League Baseball is more hands off? And there's these two leagues which used to operate even more autonomously.
Sure.
And it just seems like to me the teams are more independent in baseball than the NFL teams are independent to the NFL. Is that right or wrong?
I'm not super on top of the NFL. I do know you don't tend to see as much of a disparity in spending in the NFL, if maybe that's what you mean.
There's a cap, right?
There is a cap, and just you don't see, at least at the numbers that I've looked at, a lot of teams generally approach the cap in the NFL. Like they kind of are up near the cap. Maybe they're a few million here or there, but like they're up there. And in baseball, you've got a couple teams that are up near like 200 million, let's say.
Okay.
But I don't think you have teams in the NFL that are spending like a third.
Right.
I think they're mostly spending more. So I don't know if the NFL kind of lays a heavy hand to say like you need to spend a little more. Wink, wink, nod, nod.
Baseball won't do that though, huh?
No, not to that degree. I mean, I know the Pirates got flagged. The Pirates and the Marlins got flagged for not. There was Major League Baseball sold the I think it's called the pitch track system. They sold it. That company sold it. Anyway, teams got a one-time like chunk payment of like $50 million each for this. Yeah, the pitch track. Yeah, it was a lot. Major League Baseball. And so the teams got a one-time payment, and they were supposed to
windfall, whatever it is, use
that. Maybe it's $25 million, but supposed to use that money to increase player salaries. Like there was a directive from Major League Baseball to do that, and there was a grievance filed. I know against the Pirates, and I think the Marlins for not doing that, or they didn't follow those.
Pocketed the money,
right? Obviously, I mean, it's not like you just turn around and drop $25 on someone or $25 million. There's maybe you're supposed to use a certain amount, but it was designed to be used for player salaries, and the Pirates got cited or grievanced or whatever it was for not spending that money. It was a couple years ago.
They've been able to push back at all attempts of putting a salary cap in baseball, huh? The union has been able to.
Yeah. I mean, they've got the luxury tax threshold. That seems to be. I mean, I'm sure teams that want to spend more money don't want to have to pay the tax, but I don't really hear a lot of people calling for a salary cap in place of this kind of luxury tax threshold.
Okay.
Seems to be like you used the phrase it's working. I don't like using that particular phrase, but it seems to be having the desired effect, and I don't see either side bitching about it a whole lot. When they signed the last collective bargaining agreement, they set what that amount. I'm pretty sure they set that number for like the ensuing years that we're going. And there's another collective bargaining agreement that's going to have to be signed. Is it after next season? I think. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to have to set what that level is going to be. I'm sure there'll be some teams pushing for it to be higher, and some teams pushing for it to be lower. But it doesn't. I don't hear a lot of people complaining about it, so I don't expect a salary cap, and I don't think that's going to happen.
The difference between the values of the individual franchises in baseball, there's a big disparity there, but I think the values are closer in football, isn't it right? I mean, do they operate as their own PLs so vivaciously in football? Yeah,
I would. I would probably say this: the least valuable franchise in the NFL, which I don't know would be off the top of my head, but the least valuable franchise in the NFL I would say easily dwarf the least valuable franchise in baseball, because NFL as a whole is just a larger money machine.
Okay.
In terms of the most valuable football franchise, I know for baseball, I'm pretty sure it's the Yankees. But for football, would it be like the
Cowboys? Maybe.
Oh yeah, probably would be the Cowboys. I don't know offhand. Forbes does these lists every year. I just haven't noticed. Would the Cowboys be more valuable than the Yankees? I bet they probably would be.
The fascinating thing, though, to me would be to compare how Major League Baseball runs their operation and the NFL runs their operation, how they're out of their main offices, how it's structured and the controls that are built in there, and how the leagues are run.
And I'm sure they'd like to keep a lot of that close to the vest.
There's got to be some differences in there.
Oh, for sure. I do agree with you that the NFL does have a heavier-handed feel to it. That it does feel... it feels like a lot more goes through the league office in the NFL than goes through the league office in baseball. Okay. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it certainly feels that way.
Okay. My friend, thank you. I appreciate you giving me all this time.
Absolutely. No, it's fun to be out here and fun to stare at all the colors. What's new in here from is the Johnny Rotten new?
No, that's all. I had a portrait done by Tom McGallis.
Oh, I can't see that. It's behind you.
in typical McGallis style.
Wow,
with,
that
with
looks-
my daughter and my
look at
son
that.
in there. It's pretty freaky.
That looks really cool. Is that a local artist?
Yeah, Tom is he's a national artist. He's based out of Cleveland.
Oh,
He was
okay.
a Pittsburgh native for a long time. Worked on QED.
Oh, okay. That looks awesome. Where are you going to put it? You don't have any room.
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's
Hang it off one of your. You can hang it off one of your speakers.
I
or
could.
whatever.
I'm running out of wall space here, which I guess is a good thing. But this is like a.
We need to knock the wall down and move
Well,
one studio over.
You know what? There's been talk, not from me, but there's been talk from other people around the studio and around the show that we've got the neighboring suites.
Okay.
That we thinking about enlarging, maybe kinda, and turning the table this direction in the middle of the room and doing some other crazy things. But
I like your setup.
you know, it's quaint.
It is
and
quaint. I
quiet.
like it. There's a lot going on, but it's simultaneous.
going on. There's a lot going on.
Simultaneously, a lot going on, but it's not distracting, which is
Well, good.
neat. Lots to look at.
Yeah, and it's the optics are pretty cool. And it's funny when I have 2 guests in or I have 3 guests in and we have a full house. It's really it's warm. It's a good time. It's really a good time.
It is. No, it's very nice.
But I appreciate it, Matt.
Absolutely.
Come back soon, right?
Will do. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
All right, friends, we are out.